I was 41. I was working in healthcare and I had never heard the term perimenopause. And then almost overnight was like a shell of myself. And I was waking up at 3 a.m. with panic attacks that kind of stuck with me all day. So it's kind of like a chronic panic attack. I'm in the midst of a mental health crisis here, like a thing. And I finally reached out to my psychiatrist and she said, well, I've known you for 12 years. And this is not how your anxiety presents, but it's exactly what we see when cortisol spikes after the last REM cycle and your progesterone has started dropping in perimenopause.
If you don't know me yet, I'm Robin Thomas, founder of Living Well Connections, a healthy living community that supports, educates, and empowers us all to make healthy decisions toward a more balanced and fulfilling life. I have a background in medical research, and I love exploring the interplay of our physical, mental, and spiritual selves.
Erica Frenkel works with clients in perimenopause and menopause to nourish themselves, boost energy, and find their purpose in this phase of life. Her clients build habits that support the person they become and feel at home again in their bodies. Welcome, Erica. I'm so happy we have this chance to talk.
Likewise.
This is going to be great.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. We've been wanting to do this for quite a while, and it's here today. So I'm thrilled. I'm really thrilled. It's a great way to get to know each other better too.
Right. I love it. What a good excuse.
So tell me a little bit about what you're doing now. It looks like you are focusing a lot on perimenopause and menopause, which I've been through both.
Yeah.
So this is very relevant for me. But the fact that, I mean, the thing is people going through it, when you're going through, especially perimenopause, you say, am I going crazy?
You got it.
What's going on? My body's not like I've known it all my life. and why am I feeling this way? And why am I getting fuzzy brain? And, why are these things happening?
Yeah. Well, your question is somewhat of my answer. So I, about 4 years ago, I was in my dream job. I'd been in healthcare for 20 years and it was running innovation in the emergency department of a major health system. And for about a year, I was on the top of my game. And then almost overnight was like a shell of myself. And I was waking up at 3 a.m. with panic attacks that kind of stuck with me all day. So it's kind of like a chronic panic attack. I don't know if that's a thing. And I finally reached out to my psychiatrist and said, I think I need something like a Xanax or something because I can't hack it anymore. Like, I don't know what's going on. I need something to help me get through the day. And I was one of the lucky ones who had somebody who asked me, she said, of course, I can prescribe you whatever you want, Erica, but first tell me, how's your cycle? And I was like, I'm in the midst of a mental health crisis here. Like, I'm not interested in talking to you. Like, why are you asking me this, And she said, well, I've known you for 12 years, and this is not how your anxiety presents, but it's exactly what we see when cortisol spikes after the last REM cycle and your progesterone has started dropping in perimenopause. I was flabbergasted. I was 41. I had 2 degrees. I was working in healthcare and I had never heard the term perimenopause.
Really?
So I was it was these equal parts enraged that I was like so caught off guard and so relieved that there was something there to explain what felt so different in my body.
Right.
And so that without feeling dramatic, and of course not overnight, but that essentially set me on my path to where I am today. Because I went deep, I started finding all these beautiful ways that I could help others find support and connect some dots that were not being connected. And ultimately decided that this is really where I can have the impact on someone's health and well-being in the way that I was sort of seeking for 20 years in my career, trying to change a whole system. And so today I work with clients to understand what's going on in their body, feel at home in their body again, and find the motivation to get and stay healthy. And it was really from that conversation, opening my eyes that this is not just something to go through. We talk about going through menopause, but it is really the rest of your life.
Yes. And it's, well, a lot of the things that help you anyway.
Exactly. And that's what coaching showed me.
Yeah.
That's what coaching showed me. I learning how to help somebody work through chronic, IBS or some other chronic illness, or understand weight loss, or understand the comorbidity of different illnesses. They're foundational pieces that support you in any phase of life. And so that's why I do talk about it as the rest of your life. You're not going to be feeling miserable for the rest of your life, but the playbook your body needs shifts to a new one that you're going to need for the rest of your life. And that's how I meet my clients.
Absolutely. I've seen that happen. I've seen that happen in me. I know I feel way better now in my late 60s than I did in my mid 40s.
Yeah. Isn't that beautiful? I mean, that's the hope. And your 60s, your late 60s is not what we used to think of it in terms of your lifespan. And so you want your health span to match it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want a really good health span.
Yes. Another way, Robin, that I talk about this is in seeing my mandate. When we went through puberty the first time, we had books and curricula and teachers and parents telling us what to expect, what would happen, that everything would be different, and that everything could be connected to this experience. Now, in this phase of perimenopause is essentially another puberty, but we are often on these islands. We've created lives where we're quite isolated from each other. When we connect, we don't want to be talking about all the negative challenges that we're dealing with. And so people think that they're the only ones going through this.
Yes, that is so true. That is so true. It's like I said at the beginning, it's like people go, am I going crazy?
Yes, exactly.
What's happening?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why I do what I do and how I came to it.
That's wonderful. Well, that's wonderful because you're there yourself, and you know where people stand. You know what's happening. I think it's be very challenging. I don't go male, female, but it's very challenging for a male doctor to really understand.
Sure.
It's going to be very challenging for a husband to understand.
Absolutely.
They're like, they're like, yeah, you are going crazy.
Right. Although on the sort of positive side of that, it also can help them affirm what you're noticing, right? Like, yeah, this isn't the person I know. And I do think that you're not crazy for thinking this, and let's try to find you some support, right? That's how partners and those who have not really kind of touched it themselves can be the most supportive, is really believing and supporting and not really reacting as though it's an intentional shift in how they're being kind of how they're interacting with their spouse or family member.
Well, let's go on to some of your tips and some things you help people with specifically. It will sound like a disconnect, but really isn't.
Right. Well, I think one of the main things, like we talked about, is that when we are facing this challenge, we think that we have the avenues. If I'm having anxiety out of nowhere, I have to go to my therapist. If I am gaining weight, I have to diet and work out harder. If I am losing hair, I need to go to my dermatologist. And those are all options that are on the table. And what I find in my clients is that the experience of trying to get support in some of the conventional ways can often leave them short. And that is in part because this is nothing wrong with you. This is quite, in fact, your body performing and existing as it should. And so when nothing is wrong, we can't necessarily medicate our way out of it. And that is what we go to doctors for, is to figure out what is wrong and treat it with the support.
And fix it. Yeah.
That isn't to say there isn't a role for doctors, and certainly there is hormone replacement therapy is an incredibly valuable tool that is behind a prescription, so it needs a doctor. What I often am working with people with on, however, is the sort of peripheral complementary ways. So core to this is changing your playbook. There are sort of the foundations of nutrition, of exercise, of sleep, and what I call stress resilience. That is kind of the perfect recipe of what I'm working with people on to manage symptoms and strengthen their bodies to support that which estrogen and progesterone historically was really key in supporting. So maintaining muscle fiber, maintaining bone density, supporting healthy weight metabolism, supporting healthy cholesterol, nourishing your brain, right? All these wonderful ways that hormones support us through our early years. And once those fluctuations begin is when we start seeing some of these symptoms appear. And it really is a factor of not having the support from the hormones.
Right.
So that's kind of the core, some of the core ways that I work with folks. And each person has a different dial on what they need the most support on.
That's true. That's complicated. You can't just sort of jump in and like, oh yeah, we need to fix your hormones.
Right. Exactly.
It is very personal.
It is. And so one of the things that I work on when I first connect with someone is really around what is your experience and what is your intuition right now about where you feel the most kind of need for support. Then there's also somewhat of a quantifiable conversation around, let's get some lab testing done and understand and make sure that we're ruling out other concerns or other diagnoses that may or may not have similar presenting symptoms to what you're experiencing, right? So that's the thyroid issues that sometimes can be GI concerns or gut microbiome issues. Right. Certainly we want to rule out any cardiovascular concerns. Once those are ruled out, or even if they're not, we now know a little bit more about what we're working with.
Right.
So we really bring the client's own lived experience and kind of awareness of her body, coupled with ideally some quantifiable markers that have been kind of determined either through blood or saliva or urine or stool.
Yeah, that's important. Testing, I think, I think testing is always very important.
Yeah. It becomes a part of the sort of investigation.
Yeah, testing instead of guessing.
Yeah, testing instead of guessing, right.
This may be very good. And they are tips. You told me a few of them. One we missed talking about was about nutrition. And I'm all about nutrition. This is like my favorite. I mean, I can tell the way I've been eating, the way I eat, I can feel great.
Right.
Or I can feel pretty crappy. And I usually am telling people to follow what they're eating now at the very beginning when we first meet. Okay, let's just write down what you're eating now and how you feel.
Right. I mean, that's so that kind of information is so important, and I find it so easy for folks to think, oh well, I know it basically, but when you actually start connecting dots like that, it's pretty powerful. You're right. Nothing in my practice is kind of top down. That I take the coach approach, always kind of meeting folks where they are. What I have found when I kind of distill back from all of the different symptoms that I talk about, and I have a whole kind of workshop that I run sort of explaining how hormones interact with your metabolism, all these other systems of your body. What I extract from that is really kind of a framework. And so I'll sort of share, there's 4 kind of core nutrition principles, and then that kind of ladders up to a way to think about each plate. And before I do that, I think the reason I focus on nutrition so much with folks is that you get 3 tries each day to start again. Yeah. It is such a beautiful opportunity to, in a microcosm, to pour into yourself and to think about what does your body need? And so with respect specifically to perimenopause, although of course, as you said at the top of the call, there's not anything that's going to be harmed by eating in these kind of core, beautiful ways, right? And that can really support a lot of different needs. First and foremost, we want to be balancing our blood sugar. So estrogen helps your cells absorb the sugar from your blood. And so as your estrogen levels decline, that creates an opportunity for leftover sugar in the blood to be converted to fat, to be creating crashes, to be creating cravings, right? There's a lot with blood sugar that affects our sleep and our energy. And so thinking about whole foods that are very low in added sugar, with really kind of adding a ton of fiber to support the digestion, and I'll go into this a little bit more, is really key. Balancing blood sugar, building muscles and bones. This is, of course, you know, particularly with building strength, you'll see some of the near-term impact, but you really are starting to sort of deposit into your health bank for long-term payoff, right? This is where we see that health span really getting expanded. Choosing anti-inflammatory foods that keep your whole system in a reduced inflamed state, reducing the inflammation in your body, is so important for joint health, preventing autoimmune disorders. For those struggling with weight gain, it's often helpful there. And for your digestion, just all around, we want to look for anti-inflammatory foods. And finally, the fourth piece is nourishing your brain. And this is, again, we see the protective elements of some of our hormones does in the long term create some concerns around cognitive decline. And in the near term, we're dealing with brain fog and lack of focus and mood issues. So really finding brain friendly foods becomes important. So if I summarize, it's balance blood sugar, build muscles and bones, choose anti-inflammatory foods, and nourish your brain. What that ladders up to in terms of core foods, and then this is really where I start to explore with my clients about what this looks like for them, is more fiber than you think you need throughout the day. Definitely, you know, a half a cup of veggies in every meal, including breakfast. Leafy greens and dairy for that calcium, and vitamin K, which kind of helps tell it where to go. And that does double duty as fiber and protein, which is the next one. I mean, protein is having its moment now.
Yeah, it is.
For good reason, right? So we want, you know, ideally you're getting it from whole foods and not from synthetic protein sources. They're not all created equal. So some are quite, you know, palatable and have fewer ingredients. But generally you want to get to support your muscles, to support your energy throughout the day. And one of the key pieces that I think people don't appreciate is this fancy word, satiety, which just means staying fuller longer. And that's what really leads to some of the sort of support for your body, where you're not constantly eating, digesting, putting your body at work to work. And then finally, healthy fats. So we see that in fatty fishes, in nuts and seeds and avocados and some olive oils and avocado oils, but really you want to get that in every meal too.
Right.
So the framework, some of the core foods, and then what does that look like in your life? That's where the starting point, the jumping off point is.
And you can find, it's pretty easy to find foods you like that are in that.
Absolutely. It's a
very delicious foods. We're not saying, okay, you're on a strict salad diet. No, we're not saying that. You can find wonderfully delicious foods.
And to your point about creativity, I think if cooking is something you enjoy, or you know, if you consider yourself a foodie, this is a chance to really get experimental with spices and different cuisines and sharing it with people, right? Finding community that way, where you guys are, where it isn't around going out to grab a drink only, but really kind of using this kind of delicious food as a chance for connection in addition to nourishing your body.
you're helping them physically, but you're also helping them mentally, helping them feel, well, first of all, that they're not going crazy, that there are steps we can do that will alleviate some of the symptoms, maybe not all of them, but some of them. And that also, just in general, helping women, because you go through this and you start feeling uncertain of yourself.
Yeah. One of the most powerful ways that I work with women is their opportunity to slow down and look inward for the first time in maybe ever or many, many years. There's sort of a definitional point at, someone in their 40s or 50s, maybe late 30s, who has gone through a lot of life and worn a lot of identities. And particularly if they've become parents or caregivers for aging parents, they have subsumed that identity, maybe in their career, maybe as a spouse, maybe as a volunteer in their church or their neighborhood. There is something that has been an identity. They have many identities, and often it has not been one that's been kind of thoughtfully cultivated.
Right.
And one of the beautiful kind of counterbalances to some of the really challenging symptoms that women can experience is this almost indescribable awakening of their purpose, of their alignment with their identity. And there's this, it's sort of combined with, or perhaps a product of, this reality that they're at a point in their life when they care the least about what other people think, and start questioning the sort of gospel or the truth, the rigidity of this idea that there's a one way of being successful, one way of feeling like you're living a purpose-driven life. And I remember my own experience kind of, and I still kind of am in this process, but I was telling my husband, like, yeah, I'm feeling out of my body, but there's also this sort of feels like tingly with opportunity, right? Like there's this trajectory I've been on for 20 years that has been only moderately satisfying. And now I feel like there's something else out there that I'm actually excited to go explore.
Isn't that great?
And that's powerful. And
yes.
that I often talk to my clients. I say, the symptoms are often the Trojan horse to get us to the table to really evaluate all aspects of our life.
Yeah,
so one of the things you often see in women, and my own experience, is an evolution in career, a pivot in a career, a completely new career, new hobbies, new kind of political beliefs, right? They kind of just really question everything that's been ingrained in them because it's just something they never questioned. And it's a beautiful opportunity. And I think it does have to do with some shifting experiences in their own body as a result of a hormonal change. And that's coupled with the fact that this happens at a point when you've lived enough life to really dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of things are usually happening at the same time. You're beginning to be an empty nester, maybe.
Yeah.
The kids are growing up and moving on, or suddenly you're a caregiver of your parents when they've always been supportive, but suddenly now they're not able to do that.
Yeah.
And they need you. And I see this over and over time. Oh, so-and-so needs me. So-and-so needs me. Always needs me. And finally it comes to a point where it's like, well, I need me.
Yeah.
I need to pay attention to me.
It's so true. And I have to tell you, that brings up two stories. I mean, I think I ran a workshop recently, and I had a woman come up to me afterwards and say, I'm a postpartum doula, and I spend my life kind of pouring into these women, and sitting here made me realize I want a doula. I need a doula. I need someone to kind of shepherd me into this new phase. Yeah. And I thought it was such a beautiful way to say it, because it doesn't take away from how much purpose she finds in giving of herself to others. And it can be a real awakening that no one is going to ask you what you need unless you know what you need, right? Like no one's going to come to you and without you being aware of it. And I think that the sort of other story or the other thing that comes up as you share this is one of the, I'm always trying to avoid being Pollyannish or too romantic about it, but I do think one of the silver linings of feeling as out of our bodies or as poorly as we can at different points, depending on the symptoms, is you get to a point where you're willing to ask for help, or you get to a point where you say, I'm not going to live like this anymore, because there's been a low level of kind of pouring from an empty cup for many years, perhaps, but there is no more pouring. And that starts that journey of kind of pouring back into yourself. And that's really the gift that can be on the other side of some of those challenges.
It's a huge gift.
Yeah.
It really is. It's the, you said this earlier, you know, giving up what other people keep telling you to do and deciding for yourself what you need to do.
Right. Right. And that's it can be overwhelming. You know, I sit with people as they kind of run the gamut of emotions. And it's not an end point. It's kind of like a commencement, if you will, right? Because I say, you know, I have a slide that I often show that really illustrates that this shift in structural and kind of physical existence can be up to kind of a half to 2/3 of your life, right? If we think about lifespan now for women, and the fact that we're seeing symptoms of perimenopause show up sometimes at the end, like, you know, late 30s. So this isn't a stopgap. It becomes kind of like I say, a commencement into this next phase of life that's going to be evolving in itself. And that is where I think some of the work that we put in at this point to strengthen that health span, as I was telling you, really starts to pay off.
It absolutely does. And gosh, creativity comes back. I mean, you know, I think I'm thinking of my mother, because she passed away about 1.5 years ago, just shy of her 99th birthday.
Wow.
So when you're talking about a great portion of her life,
Yes,
was post perimenopausal, post menopausal, and she did an awful lot after that. I mean, she really did. She was very much a doer, and very creative too. She started quilting. She started smocking little clothing, you know, dresses and outfits, things. She just was doing all kinds of gardening. She'd always wanted a big garden because she had one growing up. I mean, her family had one growing up, and so she made sure I was in her mid-60s. They bought a place that had this huge land for gardening.
Beautiful. Yeah, I mean, I think that, and those kinds of decisions can start to be made. Like, what home am I going to be at home in? How can I nourish these opportunities that I feel, or this purpose that I feel? And that's why I think some people do kind of upend their careers and find something that just matters more to them, or they have, as you say, as their kids get older, they make the time in their schedule for some of these new outlets to find themselves. And you know, Work With Me is just one outlet, but there's so many different ways. And you know, I think one of the pieces that is key is the community that you build around it. Around that life, around whatever it is, finding your people, in other words, and really cultivating that. And for me, when I work in groups, that's one of the most powerful points of value that I think we all find, is just walking into a room with wise women to find and be vulnerable is really, it takes intentionality in this day and age. And it is a powerful way to kind of explore and learn and really do some self-reflection in the midst of supportive community.
It's a big piece of why I have this podcast.
Yeah. Yes.
because it's bringing people together. And then I have a community I founded. We had parties at my house, like potlucks at my house, the best food ever.
Yeah, right.
And it's continued on in various ways over the years. It's still that feeling of community. I love it. You can pretty much ask any question you want in there, and there's going to be someone in there that can help you figure out what you want to do about it.
And that's really kind of the way we used to live, right? I mean, we are in a small period of time of an experiment where living this isolated from other women truly is the norm. And I think there's always this kind of joke, it's really hard to make friends over 30 or over 40, wherever you are in life is what you say, right? And so figuring out how to do that with intentionality and without draining yourself is such an important part of this process.
How is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Great question. So you can go to my website, 𝐿𝐼cafrenkel.com, and join my newsletter or my email list there. And then you can find me on Instagram at Erica Frenkel, one word.
Perfect. I'll make sure to put those in the show notes too.
Terrific. And I'll share with you a resource that I built around some of these nutrition pieces that you can share with folks there as well.
Oh, excellent. So there'll be a link to that
exactly.
resource. I'll put that in there. I'll put that at the top of the show notes so people don't miss it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Robin, for having me. This is so fun.
Thank you so much for joining me at my Over 40 and Fabulous podcast. If this podcast has been helpful for you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with those in your life who need to hear this empowering message. And don't forget to download my free gift, 5 Ways to Get Started with Healthy Habits Without Getting Overwhelmed. This free guide leads you through 5 small steps that will allow you to ease into healthy habits until they become a natural part of your life. It's wonderful if you're just not quite sure how to get started. To get this helpful guide, go to robinthomas.is/community support, and I will put it in the show notes too. Drop in your email and it will arrive straight to your inbox. Bye for now, and I'll see you